Good morning. Today we're working on the vest belt, attaching it to the back, and then we're going to put start putting the body of the vest together. All right. So what you're going to need is one of your back pieces. They're both lining, either one. If you've decided to do a fashion fabric back, you'll want the fashion fabric because once you attach the belt, whichever piece you attach it to, that now becomes your outside fashion fabric vest for when we put everything together. Okay, so we do need our vest back. We need to place we're going to have to place the belt on the vest once we've made it, and they're going to attach at the darts. Okay, so what we need to do is we're going to take a tape measure or a ruler, and we're going to measure on the dart up 3 5/8 inches. Okay, so the vest is being placed 3 inches above the bottom, but because we have not finished the bottom and there is a seam allowance there, that's why we've got 3 5/8. So we're just going to put a mark on the dart, and that's going to tell us where the bottom of the vest is going to be attached. Okay, so on both back darts, measure up 3 5/8 inches and put a mark. Okay, now we can actually put the vest aside for a minute because now we're going to make the belt itself. All right, now I've got one belt half made. Okay, you've got 2 halves, and what we're doing is we're finishing 2 of the edges, one short edge and one of the long edges. If you're going to use the buckle that I gave you, then we need to make a smaller belt. So we'll take a 5/8 seam allowance if you're using the buckle I provided. If you have gotten a 1-inch belt buckle, then you'll be using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, that would be the only difference. So what we want to do is you've got your vest belt piece. Of course you'll have 2, and we're going to fold that right sides together. If your fabric doesn't have a right side, whichever side you put the marks on is your wrong side. Okay, so we're going to fold that in half long ways. We'll pin that edge. Actual pin. So on your vest belt, there is a notch, right? So the end by the notch is the end we're going to leave open. So the short end on the other side is the one we're going to stitch closed. All right, folded long ways, right sides together. And now we have it pinned. Okay, so we're going to stitch the one long side, then we're going to turn a corner and pivot and stitch this short end, and that's going to make our little tube to make our belt. So like I said, use this buckle, then this first seam will be 5/8. If you have gotten a 1-inch buckle as instructed on the pattern envelope, then you'll do with the 3/8, which is noted on the pattern piece. This is construction stitching, so we're at 2 1/2, and we will back stitch. Now this short end here I have marked at 3/8, which is what it was on the pattern piece. So when I come to that line, I'm going to make sure my needle is exactly in the down in the fabric. I'll lift my presser foot and turn a 90-degree angle to pivot, and then I'll finish stitching this end. Right, so we basically just sewn an L, okay? Now I'm going to trim my corners, which we talked about when we talked about making the welt, right? Because you don't want the bulk in those corners. You don't want to cut through the stitching. I'm also going to trim this seam allowance because it's going to help us when we turn this right side out to have a little less bulk inside of there. So probably, depending on what you have access to, there are a number of things that you can use to help turn this right side out. Because what we basically need to do is take this sewn end and tuck it inside this little tube that we made. And then you just want to continue to push that end through until it comes out the other side, okay? I think that one of the best tools for this is probably using the eraser end of a pencil, if you have one with an eraser, but the non-point end. So you'll just stick that, so you'll tuck the end in, you'll stick the pencil into there, and we're just going to push through, just kind of slide that fabric along the pencil until the end comes out. Then we'll pull the end off, pull the fabric the rest of the way out. Okay, now we've turned it right sides together. And if you remember from our welt, what's next? We want that corner. We don't want that corner folded in like that. So I'm going to take my trusty knitting needle. I'm going to gently kind of work that corner out so we get a point. Right, so we've now got a nice square end to our belt. And then the next step is to press that. Right, just press it nice and flat. And there we are. So now we have two belt ends to work with. All right. One of these will need the buckle attached to it, okay? So the way you do that is whatever buckle you get, there should be a center bar. You're going to slide the finished end of the buckle through that bar from bottom to top and go back through top to bottom. Okay? Right? So now we're going to fold that end over so it wraps over the end of the bar. And you just want just enough fabric past that bar to be able to catch that. You don't want a big flap of fabric sticking there. Now I'm going to come back to this side and I'm going to put a pin through both layers of fabric. I didn't want to come quite back up because my pin is really long, but you see I've got both layers of fabric pinned through there, okay? Now, if you want to be nice and safe and make sure you don't break a needle, you can stitch this by hand. You could do a slip stitch or a whip stitch or a cross stitch, just getting that closed off. I'm going to do this on the machine, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch very close to the bar where that pin is on my machine. But like I said, you want to go very carefully because you don't want the needle to hit that metal and break. So that's why it's even more important to use your hand wheel to place your needle in the fabric. And then you're just going to go nice and slow because sometimes if you're going slow, then if it does hit the metal, you can kind of feel it when it does, and you can back off. Now I want to go backwards, which is even trickier. You can just do a straight stitch and just back stitch at the beginning and end. All right. So now I've stitched. So now this buckle is attached to this end of the vest belt. Trim my threads. All right, excellent. So now we have made our vest belt, and now we need to attach it to the vest back, okay? So we've put our mark at 3 5/8 inch up from the bottom on the darts. That's where the bottom of our vest our buckle is going to be. I like to put the buckle on the left side if you're looking at the vest. It's not a hard and fast rule which way it goes. It just that way your right hand can kind of work the buckle in the back. So if you're right-handed, as most of us are, not all, then that works well. But if you are left-handed, you might want to do it the other way. Okay. So when I'm placing my vest on, there's the seam side and there's the folded side. I like to have the seam side down, as in facing the bottom of the vest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my vest belt so the bottom of it is on that 3 5/8 inch mark, and the raw edge is about 1/4 of an inch in toward the center, crossing the dart. Okay. If you want, you can finish these ends with serging or zigzag or fold them under, but we're basically going to fold the rest of the vest belt over like this to kind of encase that raw edge. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one, and like I said, so as you see, we're laying the vest belt on with the raw edge toward center and the finished edge hanging past the side seam. The bottom edge is at 3 5/8 up from the bottom. We're placing it on the dart, and there's about a 1/4 inch bit of fabric that's going in toward center past the dart. Okay, where that pin is exactly where we're going to stitch this on. So we're actually stitching it into the dart. Sometimes vest belts are sewn into the side seam, sometimes dart. It depends on the design. So we want to start right exactly at the top and finish exactly at the bottom of the belt. Right, so when it's sewn on, it's right there. That stitching line is in line with the dart. We've got our 5/8, our 1/4 hanging over. We'll do the same on both sides. All right, so there's that side. Trim our threads. Remember, sew, clip, press. I've got some, I'm not trimming the fabric, the raw end of the fabric, because we've just so little kind of hanging over anyway, but I am going to trim some of these kind of threads that are hanging off that end, just to clean it up. Make sure you clip your threads on both sides. All right. Sorry, camera. So now we have our vest put on there the first time and kind of sticking out to the sides, and it needs to live toward the middle. Okay, so we're just going to fold this over on our stitching line. We're going to put in a pin about 1/4 inch, and you can measure these. I've just kind of been sewing for a while, so I can kind of eyeball them. I think maybe I really had about 1/8 inch hanging over inside. But so yeah, so now we folded it toward the center. We're pinning it down between 1/8 and 1/4 inch inside, and now we're going to do a top stitch. Top stitch basically just means that we're stitching on top of the fabric so you see the stitching when it's done. Remember, the edge of our foot is approximately 1/4 inch. So if you want to use that as your guide. Clip our threads. Alright, so now our vest belt is sewn on, and when we folded it over and closed it, we've encased that raw edge inside our second set of stitching. So that is your vest back belt. Then this guy just slides in here. And this just allows you to have a little bit more adjustment and control. It kind of, you can pull it a little closer to the body once it's on for fit preference. Fit preference, rather. And I believe that your pattern has you trim the side that the buckle is on down so that your buckle can sit in the middle, and that's absolutely certainly something you can do. I often kind of skip that step just in the mode of expediency, but it does give you a better finished look if you've got that buckle sitting in the middle. So if you want to trim the buckle side down as it says in the vest instructions, then please by all means do that. All right, so that is our vest belt. The next thing we're going to do is very, very close to getting our vest finished. Okay, so right now what we have, so what you should have at this point, we have our vest. This is now our outerwear fashion fabric side of our vest because it has the belt. So that's the back fashion fabric one. We should have a back lining. We have our fashion fabric fronts with your welts and or your welt pockets. And then you have your front lining with the facing attached. That one's going to match up with your vest back lining. Okay, so at this point you should have 6 pieces. You've got your 3 outer or fashion fabric pieces and your 3 lining pieces. So we're going to work with these as lining and fashion fabric separately. Okay, so I have my back right side up, and I'm going to be working primarily with the shoulders. So you just want to make sure the top half of that is nice and flat. Now I've got right side facing me. And the way that the vest front is going to be on is we're going to sew it together at the side, at the shoulder seams. Okay? So it's when it's done, when it's sewn on, it's going to look basically like this. Okay, so our armhole is here. Our neck edge, which is where our front where the front closure is going to be, the center front, those are the sides that match up, okay? And, you know, we've done everything right. We have two opposite fronts, so that's going to work out. Now, in order to get these sewn on properly, we're going to match our shoulder seams. There's a notch that was on the shoulder seams that will line up. Again, make sure your arm's eye is on the same side. Your arm's eye for your front and your back is on the same side from the shoulder seam, and your center back neck and your center front are on the same side. So we'll line up these shoulder seams. We're going to match our notches. And I always start by matching my notches. I'll pin those first. And then I'll go, usually I'll pin my corners from there, especially on a straight seam like this. Okay, so shoulder seam, pinned edges together, match your notch. We'll do the same thing with our other shoulder seam and our other front piece. Matching our notches. So just like when we had our little squares of fabric, we make sure these edges are, the edges of the fabric are lined up properly. Okay, so now we have these shoulder seams pinned together. And now we just sew standard seam right there across the shoulder seam. You want to make sure everything's flat under the foot. Our fabric doesn't get bunched up. Do it on this shoulder as well. All right, so now this is sewn at the shoulder seams. And now we'll press those seams open. So now you've got a piece. Don't knock over your iron. So now this whole piece looks like this. All right, so that's what it looks like from the inside. Okay, this is what it looks like from the right side. Now if we fold this at the shoulder seams, all of a sudden we can kind of see This is when we can first start to really see it looking like a vest, right? So there we go. I forgot to trim these threads. All right, so that is putting the body of the vest together at the shoulder seams. We do the exact same thing with the lining pieces. I'll go ahead and show you that as well. And then from here, our next step is to join our lining to our fashion fabric, and then we will turn it right side out. Then we'll stitch it together, turn it right side out, and you're going to have a vest with about 3 steps to finishing from there. Okay? All right. Vest lining back, right side up. Vest lining front, shoulder seam. I'm making sure my arm sides are together. Matching up my shoulder seams. Matching my notches first. Then my corners. Okay, we'll do that with the other lining piece. Right sides together. Center back and front necks together. Armholes together. Line up the edges, notches first. Then corners. And then the rest. All right, so we've got our shoulder seams pinned. And then we stitch them together at 5/8. So, when we started this phase of our tutorial, we had 8 pieces. We had 2 belt pieces, We had 2 backs, 2 fronts, 2 lining fronts. Okay. Once we attach the belt to one of the backs, that back now becomes the fashion fabric back. So guess what? I just sewed this at 1/2 inch instead of 5/8. So I'm going to fix that real quick. All right, so we sewed the belt to the vest back, which created a fashion fabric back. We took those 3 pieces down to 1. So then we had 6 pieces of the vest, 3 lining pieces, and 3 fashion fabric pieces. And once we had those fashion fabric pieces, so then we group those together as lining and fashion fabric, and we sew them together at the shoulder seams. So now at this point, once you've gotten those shoulder seams together, we're down to 2 pieces for the vest, and the next step is to make those 2 pieces into 1 piece. Now it doesn't hurt to have that extra stitching in there, except for the fact that when I go to press this open, it won't press open at my 5/8, so that's why I'm going back through and pulling the stitching out. And remember, because if I sewed that at 1/2 inch, I've just added a 1/4 inch at that, or 1/8 of an inch at that seam, but I've done it twice because I've done it front and back, so that added a 1/4 inch. So it's again paying attention to your measurements. All right, 5/8 standard seam. Make sure when you come across your facing and lining piece where they're sewn together that seam that you've pressed open lays flat and open as you stitch across it. Sometimes this piece wants to get folded over, and that just creates a little bit of bulk that we're not interested in. All right, I'm going to show you how to press this again because I think you know how to press the seam open. So that's our steps here. We have made the vest belt, attached it to the vest back, and then we have attached the two front pieces to the fashion fabric front pieces to the fashion fabric back piece, and we have attached the front lining pieces to the back lining piece. And that's where we are right now. So the next step is putting this together, and we'll actually see it turn into a vest. Thank you very much.